Hey everyone, Andy here. In this video, I want to have some fun painting the Terminators I grew up with when I was a kid and the latest and greatest from Leviathan. I first discovered Warhammer in around 96 when I was a kid, and my first sort of model was Space Marine bike and stuff like that. And then looking into other miniatures, I was quickly drawn to the Terminators, which at the time, the current release was the 1994 metal ones. So yeah, there are older Terminators than this, but I really wanted to paint the Terminators that I kind of grew up with first of all and compare it to the brand new latest and greatest. So I think there's 29 years apart. I'm going to say it's 30 years rounding up because it sounds cooler. But yeah, basically 30 years apart between these two Terminators. I spend most of my time recording videos for our Patreon, and Henry does most of the videos here on YouTube. So at the moment I'm painting the Eidolon of Mathlan for Idoneth Deepkin, and that's kind of my big deep dive project. I'm painting lots of non-metallic metal, and I'm spending ages painting that for Patreon. So if you're interested in that, please check out our Patreon for a bunch of other stuff. But I really wanted to do something for the release of Leviathan, so I knew I didn't have time to spend forever on a miniature, so I thought why not, as a nice palette cleanser, just pure fun, colour in two Terminators, one from 94, the first ones I ever bought, and yeah, this brand new one, and just put them side by side. So I'm not going for it in the painting in this video. It's not really a full tutorial. I'm just kind of painting them for fun. And yeah, let's just see what they look like side by side, basically. But I think I've come up with a really nice red that you could use for Blood Angels. So yeah, there's a cool recipe for red in this video. But yeah, not really a full tutorial. Just me having some fun blasting out these Terminators. I own a Terminator in its original blister pack, and I was sort of chatting to my friends like, right, time to open this. And they were like, no, you've got to keep that in a blister pack. So I managed to get the exact same one on eBay for a good price. And yeah, then I can keep my nice one in the packaging. I don't know why, I just love these old blisters in the packaging. And it has to have the red and yellow logo because that is the one that is iconic for me when I got into the hobby. Anyway, I started cleaning up this metal one, and yeah, I haven't cleaned a metal model for ages, and I didn't spend forever cleaning it because this is supposed to be a fun project that I just kind of do. But yeah, the first thing I noticed was how many imperfections there were over this miniature. So we're super lucky to have the plastic miniatures these days. The metal is a pain to work with, that's for sure. It looked absolutely terrible. But when I primed it, it wasn't so bad, actually. I remember these falling apart every 2 seconds when I was young, but luckily I'm old enough to be able to afford a drill, so I used a wow stick to quickly get some pins in there, and actually it probably won't fall apart. So yeah, it's kind of nice being an adult and being able to afford things like a drill, and yeah, you can make these miniatures actually work. But yeah, looking at the size difference, it's pretty obvious. One's way bigger than the other, but I love how they've kept the original look. It just goes to show that the original designs, by Jez Goodwin and all those people back in the 90s were spot on, and all they've had to do was tweak it. And to be honest, it's a big relief to me that they haven't turned these into Primaris, because, well, so yeah, really happy, and I hope that Games Workshop take some of these iconic designs and older stuff and bring those back too. But super relieved to have Terminators untouched, and yeah, it just shows how good this design is. The helmet, for me, you just can't change that. It's super cool looking. After I primed them both, I did a pre-highlight with white, and I'm trying to go for a fairly intense white. I'm using Tamiya, and I started off with it fairly diluted, but then I had to add some more Tamiya paint into the cup, so I got some really intense white highlights. And this is how I can get a really vibrant popping red. My idea was to basically just airbrush the armor. I would have loved to have done a really nice job hand painting everything, but this for me has to be quick and fun. And really I'm just colouring them both in so I can have a nice look at them side by side. But yeah, I think just using the airbrush is going to make this nice and quick. To get a really vibrant red, I wanted to start with the brightest red, and I'm going to use Blood Red from AK, and I hadn't really used this paint before, but I've got to say I recommend it. It starts off looking fairly pink because you're going over the white, but if you slowly build up those layers, it's a fantastic red. I really, really like it. AK paints don't airbrush amazingly well in comparison to others, but you can get them through with a little extra thinner. And that's why it looks fairly pink on this first run, because you have to build it up slowly. But the reward is a very vibrant, super intense red. And yeah, hopefully you can see in the video footage that this red came out really, really well. Because of the pre-highlight, it already looks pretty good just spraying the blood red over the top. So if you wanted a really quick army, you could leave it there. I did, however, want to enhance the shading. And what I'm doing now is blending it in with Mephiston red. And Mephiston red is actually a really nice colour for the main colour, but in comparison to the blood red, it's actually quite a big step down. It's darker, so it works really well to kind of blend into the shadows, and it's nice to have that variation of the red. But yeah, I think Mephiston red is fantastic. Evil Sun Scarlet is a good colour as well, but I think the AK blood red just has that little extra oomph, and it's more vibrant for the top highlights. After the Mephiston red, which kind of blended the colours together, I wanted to shade it even further. So you can see I'm basically working backwards. I start with the pre-highlight, then the brightest red, and I go into a darker red with the Mephiston. And here I tried out Corn Red, but I didn't like how it turned out because it changed the tone. Corn Red is a lot colder, and I usually like that a lot for shading, but I didn't think it worked in this case. So instead, I switched it out for Mephiston red, and I just added some black. And I think when you have black in the shadows of the red, even though it's desaturated, it helps a lot to make the highlights of red seem even brighter. I was really enjoying this project at this point. Didn't know how the red was going to turn out because I hadn't used that blood red before, and actually Mephiston red is something I never use, but using in this way turned out so well. And at this point I was thinking, ooh, Blood Angel's army. But then I came to painting the black later on and I remembered, no, I'm not going to do an army of these guys anytime soon. But what a fun little project this is turning out to be already. I'm obviously doing the metal one at the same time, and I'll flick between the footage on both of those Terminators, but I decided to paint them in the exact same way, which is really how I would paint an army in a modern style. So if you watch my Sons of Horus video, this is going to be almost identical to that in terms of focusing on airbrushing to save time on the armour, and then a lot of battle damage, which I love, and actually being really basic with a lot of the details. That's just my style for army painting, so that's kind of how I'm doing it here. I could have painted the old Marine in an old school style with a goblin green base, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to paint them both in just my normal style for gaming pieces, and that would be a fairer comparison then. I know I've missed out on some clickbait there by doing an old school Marine with goblin green base, but this is about as clickbait as I'm going to go ever really on this channel by painting an old metal Marine. After applying my decals, I decided to use AK Ultra Matte, and this will make the red seem way duller. When it was glossed up for the decals, it looked amazing, super vibrant red, but I quite like the Ultra Matte look, but you have to be aware that it's definitely a taste thing, and the reds they just look different. You'll see. Personally, I love it, and it's a varnish I can rely on, so even if it's not quite the right finish, maybe satin would be better. I just wanted to do this quickly and use a varnish I know was going to work, to be honest. It also hides the transfers better than anything else. I blocked in the black after I had done the ultra matte varnish to make sure the black was not super matte, and yeah, this is the point where I thought, yeah, this is why I haven't finished my Sons of Horus army, which I'm still going at, but I'm just blocking in the black on 40 Space Marines, and yeah, it's just the least fun part. It took me about half an hour per Marine, which doesn't sound too bad, but when you have 40 of them, oh, it's just not very fun, is it? But as soon as the black is painted on these guys, they look amazing, and having lots of black sections next to the red just again makes that red seem even better. So I didn't want to kind of do anything special with this paint job. I could have done some yellow parts and black shoulder pads, so I'm not really following the kind of Codex colour scheme. I just painted things that I thought would be cool and tried to paint as many black areas as possible to make that red stand out. I could have painted the power fist and the shoulder pads black to match some of the classic schemes, but I thought it was too, the red was too cool looking to get rid of on those shoulder pads. I painted the eyes and purity seals in green. I'm using dark green from AK, which is amazing, and I'm using their light green as well. The coverage on this for green is fantastic, so it makes highlighting eyes and other things, way easier. So I'd really recommend these over the Citadel greens. You'll just be able to get sharper highlights, cover in fewer steps. They're just better, to be honest. Like I said, I don't really have the time to spend ages on this miniature. It's just about making it look cool, and that's kind of what you do in army painting, right? So for the black parts, they already look good in that beautiful smooth Vallejo black, and I just did some highlights with AK's dark grey mixed with black first of all, and then I used dark grey on its own. I did the mix with black because actually, even though it's called dark grey, it's fairly pale and it stands out pretty full on a black highlight. So yeah, I just used it mixed with black, then on its own, and then you can add a lighter grey or some white or whatever if you want to push the highlights further. But I think for gaming stuff, 2 steps is enough, and I would do that mix with black and dark grey on its own. But I don't want to over highlight the black sections because I'm trying to make this speedy, and also again it's all about making the red sing. That's the most important part here. But I loved painting these chest eagles because they were actually modern and super crispy, and I remember struggling so bad trying to make these look really crisp back in the day on those metal versions. I found myself getting way too into adding brighter highlights for the black, and I had to stop myself because I was giving myself a time limit for these 2 miniatures of an afternoon really, and I was getting carried away, so I stopped at a certain point and I thought I better get on with the battle damage. For the battle damage, I use Burnt Umber from the Scale Artist range, so you don't have to use this paint, but I love it, and I use it for a bunch of other things, so it's a fantastic paint, really versatile. The same one I use for Sons of Horus, and I wasn't sure how it would turn out on red. Because it's quite a cold brown, it worked really, really well. And I like to just do this with a detail brush. I don't like to use a sponge. I think that you can just make it look really fantastic with a little time investment in the brush, and I just focus on the edges mostly. Instead of edge highlights, I kind of do an edge highlight with the battle damage as if the paint has worn off, and I really like that look. So I start by focusing on battle damage on the leading edges, and then I add some random chips, and because I'm using a detail brush, these are really controlled and small. You've just got to make sure that it's kind of in the areas that would receive damage and it doesn't end up looking spotty, and you just do it evenly all over the mini. You want to do it heavy in some areas and then have some areas of relief with no battle damage where it might not be able to get there. I did the battle damage before metallics because it looks quite cool if you have the worn edges with the burnt umber to pick out some of the extreme edges with a little bit of metal. And I'm not sure if this fits the background of the ceramite armor or whatever, but I don't really care. I think it looks cool, so I just pick out some of the teeny edges like on the chest with a little bit of metal as if it's worn out and then been, chipped again. And I think this variation looks fantastic on a bunch of models, and it makes the battle damage stand out more. And I really think you don't need to edge highlight if you paint in this way. It's kind of a replacement for edge highlights, and I think with all the amazing red and the airbrush highlights, there's more than enough going on, and it just saves a lot of time. I did a really fast base just with some sand, and I took the burnt umber and just washed over the unpainted sand. I diluted it quite a bit so you can still see a little bit of the sand colour coming through, and then I just put on a little bit of weathering powder, which I was rushing a bit, so my paint was a little bit wet still and the weathering powder didn't look great, but I thought that'll do for now. This is just supposed to be having some fun. Anyway, that is it. So like I said, this wasn't supposed to be kind of a tutorial, but hopefully there's some cool bits you can use in there. Certainly the red, I'm really happy with the red, and I think the recommendations for the black highlights and the green highlights, I'll stick to those. I think they're really cool. So if you're going to do a Blood Angels army, you could use this as your base tutorial. For me, it was really fun to do something quick where I didn't really have to concentrate, if that makes sense. You know, this was just having some fun, and yeah, I loved painting the old Terminator, to be honest. It was super cool. I absolutely love this design, and when the plastic Terminators were shown, I was like, yeah, these are cool, but now I've painted one, I absolutely love them. I really appreciate now what Games Workshop have done, and I have to say thanks to them for sending us the Leviathan box for the early review or whatever. But yeah, I had to do something with it, and just painting these Terminators, yeah, super happy with how they've turned out, and relieved, to be honest, that they haven't messed with the iconic design. I do hope that they release a multi-part version that has different posing options, different weapon options, hopefully a Cyclone missile launcher, because I loved that mini. That was actually the first Terminator I bought. And then maybe I'll do another project and paint a Terminator, maybe taking my time and just doing one and doing it as good as I can. I'd really like to do that. But yeah, I've got some Deepkin to paint. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got some tips from it and, you know, some cool recipes to use. But the main thing was looking how much Games Workshop have improved over the years, and how lucky we are to have these fantastic models that have been scaled properly. They're easy to build. The quality's fantastic. Yeah, it's just a pretty awesome time to be doing this hobby. Anyway, leave your comments below. Maybe some fond memories of when you first got Terminators. Let me know what you think of this red. I think it's come out really, really cool. And yeah, just any thoughts or comments on the size comparison of these two super cool miniatures. And yeah, if you want to see more videos from me where I go into a deep dive explanation on loads of stuff, then please check out the Patreon. Anyway, we'll see you soon, and Henry will be doing some more awesome content from the Leviathan box set.